So you have people coming in on temporary foreign work visas. They can be here for 2 years. So it's the idea is that it's to fill an immediate labor shortage, and they can get a 2-year visa. Someone from Australia may come to Canada on a work visa. They can be here for 6 months or up to a year. They may decide, hey, I want to stay longer. They can change their visa from a work visa to a temporary foreign worker. Okay, so visas can be changed once you're here. You don't have to go the 2-year commitment to a foreign worker. So as you know, places like Mount Washington, they hire a lot of people from Australia. Australia and Canada have an agreement that you can come and you can work here on a working holiday visa. It is time limited. It just means they're here for a short period of time. So sometimes that may not be ideal. Temporary foreign work visa means you can be here for up to 2 years. Does that answer the question okay? Yeah. Sorry, please ask any questions as we go along. I'm happy to answer. The workers need to do a medical clearance, and they need to do a criminal record check. So they also, that process is part of making sure that obviously we have outstanding citizens, healthy people coming into Canada, okay? To do a labor market opinion, you have to advertise for a minimum of 2 weeks. So again, you have to show that you've made an effort to hire Canadian workers. You have to, they look for your recruitment efforts. So did you look at hiring Aboriginal people or older workers or disadvantaged groups? So again, have you exhausted any possibility for where you might find a worker? The time it takes will vary. So work visas for the Philippines, for example, is 12 weeks. Some places like Mexico are as short as 1 month. So lots of times employers will say, well, how long does this take? Right now it's taking about 6 weeks to get a LMO approved by Service Canada. Then we apply for a work visa, so it can vary from 1 month to 6 months or so. So as far as looking at your staffing for the summer, obviously that's not going to work for if you need workers next week. But again, thinking forward, again, all indicators show that we're going to be facing some pretty major labor shortages. And so just get you thinking about, okay, how am I going to deal with this? And especially in Tofino, again, working with the employers that I've been working with, it's maybe I can find someone for a couple of months or a couple of weeks, or maybe they'll stay as long as a year, but that sort of long-term stability of your staff group, having a core staff of people, is a challenge for many businesses here. Okay? So there's been some changes since the program started. So in 2007, we had 2-year work. We had LMOs that were valid for up to a year. Work visas were valid for 2 years. When the unemployment went up, Service Canada reacted and said, hey, wait a minute, we're going to just sort of scale back on the number of foreign workers that can come in. So they've only allowed 1 year for working permits, although they can be renewed. When the labor shortages were really severe, they created what they call an expedited labor market opinion, which means that they processed it much faster. That has since gone away. So there are sort of constantly changing rules and regulations depending on what the government decides. So sometimes the process can be a little bit challenging, but again, it's worthwhile. Once the worker is here, you have them for 2 years. So if, say I hired a room attendant, they came into Canada to work at my resort, that worker cannot change to another employer. So once a worker gets here, they can't decide, oh, I'm going to run, go across the street and work for somebody else. They're tied to your place of business. Okay? Okay. So why consider foreign workers? So how might this help you? Just not to bore you with some stats, but they expect that there'll be 1,126,000 job openings expected over the next 10 years. 60% of those jobs will be due to replacement generated by retirement or death. So we have a whole lot of people retiring, and then the rest of the 40% of the job openings will be due to economic growth, and the expectation for BC is 1.8%. Okay, so where are workers going to come from if we have people retiring and we don't have people coming into the workforce? What's going to happen? So at the provincial level, the number of new labor market entrants, those who leave the education system and enter the labor market for the first time, is expected to decline. So for the first time, we don't have enough people coming into the labor force to actually fill the jobs that are available. So we're getting to that point. Where are the people going to come from? We may get people coming from other provinces, and you know, people really like the West Coast, so we can't blame them for coming here. But is it going to be enough to fill our labor shortages? So I broke it down into hours, just because in the tourism sector, oftentimes we have part-time or seasonal jobs. But just to give you an idea, by 2015, they estimate there'll be almost 90 million hours unfilled, which is over 9,000 jobs in the accommodation sector, and in food and beverage, over 11,000 jobs. So the reality is that down the road, they expect that, again, our labor shortages are going to become pretty severe. Who is going to be most affected? Three main regions: mainland, Southwest, Vancouver Island, and Thompson-Okanagan. They anticipate that in the mainland, probably the response to those labor shortages will be dealt with locally. So Vancouver has the advantage of sort of having a lot of connections and being able to get workers when needed. And if they're looking at foreign workers, because there's already a lot of foreign workers in the Vancouver area, friends, family tend to migrate to those areas. Places that are going to have a challenge to fill the labor shortages is Vancouver Island. Go ahead. So in response to that, the government, British Columbia government, made an agreement with the federal government, and they said, hey, we want our own deal. So we want to be able to handle our labor shortages. We want to be able to respond to the demands on the BC level rather than responding to what happens in the rest of Canada. So they made this agreement called the Annex F, and it gives some exceptions to the regular rules of hiring a temporary foreign worker. Go ahead. And what they've said is maybe some occupations don't need a labor market opinion in order to bring in a worker. So they've identified certain occupations that they feel are going to be facing some severe labor shortages, and they're saying, let's make the process easier. So let's allow workers to come in and employers not have to go through the whole labor market opinion process. They've also said, for lower skill categories, we call them, if you're familiar with the NOT code, it's the categories that they use of different job descriptions. They have said, if you hire a foreign worker, why not allow the spouse to come with that foreign worker, and we'll give them an open work permit. So what that means is that if you hired a gentleman to be a cook and his wife also had experience as a room attendant, you might get two workers in at the same time, as opposed to right now having to apply for them individually. So this is huge, and this is definitely a huge opportunity. It means that families can stay together. It also means that you may get, two workers instead of just one at a time. They're also suggesting open work permits for children aged 18 to 22. So really changing the rules. Of course, this is given that, again, we're looking at making sure that Canadians and BC residents are selected first for jobs. If we have sectors where there just aren't any Canadians to do that, then let's provide opportunity for other people to come in. Go ahead. Over 90% of the workers that we brought to Canada have made the decision to apply for their permanent residency. So how this happens is, if I hire a worker and I know they're going to be here for 2 years, and the employer says, I think this person's great, I want them to stay, and the worker says, I think I love my job and I love Canada, or I love Tofino and I want to stay here, the employer can make the decision to sponsor them to apply for their permanent residency. And how you do that is that you apply first provincially, so you can apply to the province through the provincial nominee program, and that's the first step in the process. That once you've been approved provincially, you can apply federally, and you can apply to get your permanent residency. Once you have your permanent residency, you can also bring in spouses and you can bring in children. Over 90% of our workers have apply to do this. And so to me, it really shows that people want to come to Canada. They want to become part of our society. They want to contribute to not only the workplace but to the communities that they live in. And so it's a win-win. So if I'm looking at, it's not just having temporary staff. Potentially, you could have someone who's going to become a valid and essential employee for many, many years. Okay. Our first group of workers arrived in December 2007, and that is Frank Bure, one of the owners of Chemistry Consulting. So we waited a very long time to get our first group of workers, so we were quite thrilled to have them when they got here. We now have over 20 workers that are in the Tofino community working at a variety of resorts, and they love it. So many of them have been here for longer than 2 years, and they have no intention of leaving. So Pacific Sands, we have 4 of our workers there. Long Beach Lodge, we have 6 workers. And I've driven to Tofino many a late night, usually around 2 in the morning by the time we get here, and I have very sleepy workers that wake up and they're sort of like, where am I? And Wiccan we did a lot of work with them, and we have over 50, how many we'd have, I think over about 12 workers there, and again, still in the community. So really pleased to have them here. Again, they've been, at the time, the Wiccan well, all of the resorts, we're having some very severe labor shortages to the point where they weren't able to rent out any rooms because the rooms were dirty, and so they were in this cycle of losing business because they didn't have the staff to keep the resort running. So these were their saving grace. And when we brought the first group of workers in, Irene, one of the workers, she said, when we arrived in Tofino, we were like celebrities. We got to go on the radio and people were interviewing us. And so the last group of workers you brought in, they're like, yeah, nobody really cares anymore, but we're here. So anyways, that's a little sort of Reader's Digest version of foreign workers. I'm very pleased with the services we're all able to offer, it's a pleasure to work with people that are so appreciative of the jobs in Canada, of to be able to work in awesome communities, and certainly we're very pleased with the level of experience and the work that they put in and the commitment they make to their employers.